Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 873. 873, August the 20th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. Tuesday. Good. Always nice to get Monday out of the way, right? Okay, so let's get started on the news of the day, and we'll see where that leads us. Okay, so we learned today that Attorney General Barr had fired the acting director at the Federal Bureau of Prisons. His name was Hugh Hurwitz, Hurwitz. Apparently, he was fired about a week ago, about a week after the alleged suicide by Epstein, which nobody believes is a suicide. So apparently this firing occurred several days ago, about a week after the death of Epstein. He's already appointed a new director, and that person had previously served, I think it's a woman, had previously served in that position for about 12 years. So I'm thinking maybe Barr knew her and trusted her and put her in that position. So yes, that's the next high-level official that we've seen. So I guess the warden has been reassigned, and I assume she's being investigated. I'm sure they're checking to see if there's any large bank deposits in any offshore bank accounts that she might have some access to or something. I'm sure they're definitely looking into whether or not she may have had communications with certain people, any type of money transfers. They'll be looking really, really hard at her, I'm sure. There was also two other people at the prison there who had some sort of I guess reassignment or what have you. And of course now this is the fourth high-level person that we know of, and this of course would be the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I guess that's the top dog, and I guess this person was the acting at that time. So it looks like the acting director he fired a few days back, and now he's put this woman, I think it's a woman, who was there for 12 years previously, and she's, I think, left in 2012. So I think she's back in that position as the full-time director there, because it doesn't say acting, it says that she's the new director. So it looks like Barr is making some moves, and I can understand. I genuinely believe he is pissed off about this. I think he takes it kind of personally, and he's certainly taking hits for it. It looks bad on him, no question about it. He has taken a bit of a beating even here on TowerGate in the comment section. He's been taking a bit of a beating, and he received quite a few votes in the last two Dumbass of the Week contests. His name was, of course, nominated quite a few times by people in the last 2 weeks. So certainly he realizes that this does not look good on him, and I think he takes it personally. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are more people who end up getting in trouble over this. So we'll keep watching. Well, of course, everybody's trying to figure out what to think about the mooch. The mooch. Now, I never liked the mooch. I've never trusted the mooch. And so this really doesn't surprise me at all. And, of course, we can remember that when he had his 10-day stint as the communications director, what a disaster he was. If you remember, it caused a lot of problems. His being appointed ended up causing Reince Priebus to resign or get out, because he absolutely was opposed to Scaramucci's appointment. Sean Spicer left. He wasn't very thrilled with that as well. And I'm not a big fan of Reince Priebus either. I think he's connected to the establishment. I don't trust him. I wouldn't be surprised if he sticks a knife in Trump's back someday. Now Spicer, on the other hand, every time I see him, he's totally supportive of the president. So I think Spicer is a straight player, and I like him. But I never really trusted Reince Priebus. And Scaramucci, I thought he was a disaster from day one. If you remember, he gets appointed, and then within like 2 or 3 days, he's dropping F-bombs. He made a really vulgar comment about Steve Bannon. So he wasn't liked by really very many people around Trump, and I'm not sure why he got the appointment. I'm not sure who told him that, but or told Trump he should put Scaramucci in that position, but he didn't last long, and he got some really bad advice. And Trump has gotten a lot of bad advice about people he should appoint to his cabinet. That's why I'm really looking forward to a second term, because I think by then he will have figured out who the white hats and the black hats are, and I think you'll see a much more solid Trump administration in his second term. But another thing that has popped up since the weekend has passed is that a while back, quite a while back actually, Jack Posobiec of ONA, of One American News Network, had put out a tweet where he tweeted out this email that was sent from Stefan Halper, the fat man, to Carter Page. And in that email, he mentions Scaramucci. Now, this was a long time ago, and I remember it popped up, and no one really knew what to think about it. Everybody's scratching their head, and that's kind of strange. But then it just kind of faded away. So now people are coming back and revisiting that tweet from Jack Posobiec, and it's taking on a little new meaning, taking on a little new life, as people are now digging into that a little more, because now we know a lot more about Halper than we knew back then, and we certainly know a lot more about the Mooch. So obviously the Mooch has become unhinged, and Scaramucci, of course, tweeted out on Sunday that Trump is a cult leader and his supporters are cultist. That sounds more like the Rotten Reverend Clinton, and her supporters are the cultists, not Trump's fans. No. Because the fact of the matter is, if Trump came out and started, flip-flopping and not delivering on his promises and becoming a deep state operator and all these sorts of things, his supporters would dump him in the New York Minute. It's not... I don't know that the loyalty to Trump is so much to Trump as it is to the man, as it is to the fact that he's keeping his promises and his policies. I think that's where the Trump supporters support Trump. They support the policies of Trump. There's a lot of people who probably support his policies that may not even like him that much. He said so himself. You may not like me, but you got to vote for me. So, okay. Now, I personally like Trump. I mean, I think he's hilarious. I think he's very entertaining. And most of the time, I agree with probably 90% of what he does. There's some things that give me concern. I don't like that he's talking about extended background checks. I don't like this red flag thing that he's talking, although he's not signed on to any of that. Still, it's things that concern me. But in the end, Trump typically does the right thing. He's still by far the best president of my lifetime, and he is truly taking on the deep state. And so, I think a lot of Trump supporters are like me. It's not so much that we bow down to Trump and anything and everything he does is automatically good and we're going to defend it. In fact, most Trump supporters I know, when they have a problem with something he does or says, they call him out on it. But overall, when you look at what he's said he would do, what he has done, and how he has conducted himself, regardless of the tweets and all the other stuff, and I'm okay with the tweets because, quite honestly, there's no one out there to defend him. He defends himself, and he does it better than anybody else. And if I were in his position and I had a tool like social media and I was as good at it as he is, I would certainly use it, and he should continue to use it. So this idea that Trump supporters are like, the Clinton cultist is just not true. Again, this is just Scaramucci spinning, and he knows it, and he knows that very well. So let's go back and reread that letter from Stefan Halper to Carter Page that was originally posted up, if I remember correctly, by Posobiec, and this was a while back. So let's go back and revisit and analyze this letter once again, and then take a closer look at Scaramucci now that we know a lot more about Halper. So here's this letter that was sent to Carter Page by Stefan Halper. And this letter was sent by Halper to Carter Page on July the 28th, 2017. Meaning that this was, think about the first contact with Carter Page and Halper would have been back in the spring of 2016. So this letter or email is coming to Carter Page from Halper over a year later after his original contacts with Carter Page, and certainly deep enough into, because keep in mind, in July of 2017, I mean, we're talking 3 months into the Mueller investigation, which by that point, Carter Page already knew that he had 4 vices on him. He had to know that Halper was one of the people setting him up. He had to have, by that point, figured out pretty much the game that was being run on him. But yet, we still have Halper reaching out to Carter Page as if they still have some kind of a good relationship. Now, you can tell by the way the letter is worded that it may have been some time had passed since they had last spoken, but even Carter Page admits that he continued his dialogue with Halper for approximately a year after their initial contact. So here we are, this letter on July the 28th, 2017, from Halper to Carter Page. And it reads as follows, quote, "Dear Carter, I thought I'd write as the summer wears on to ask you how you are and what your plans are at this point. It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the contretemps within the White House and how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. I must assume this gives you some relief. We are in Virginia, enjoying a warm but quiet summer. Be in touch when you have the time. Would be great to catch up. Steph." Now, this is 3 months into the Mueller investigation. He's addressing Carter Page as Dear Carter, despite the fact that at this point Carter Page has to know at this point that Halper had something to do with him getting 4 vices on him. Yet Halper is addressing Carter Page as if they're still, I mean, if someone screws you, they set you up and screw you, they don't generally, and it's pretty obvious that the person, that the person you screwed has probably figured it out. You generally just go away. If you screwed them a year ago, you generally wouldn't contact them back as if everything is hunky-dory. But this letter has a tone of it as if they're still on good terms. And that, of course, makes me skeptical. So he says, "Dear Carter, I thought I'd write as the summer wears on to ask how you are and what your plans are at this point." What your plans are at this point. Well, if Halper's keeping up with the news, by this time, Carter Page has already been on Fox News a dozen times. He's already given interviews. He's already complained about the fact that he had vices on him. He's got attorneys. He's filing lawsuits. Why would Halper be questioning about what his plans are and how he's doing? It should be pretty obvious. He'd been interviewed many times. Obviously, he's not doing well. He's not able to get work because his name's been splattered all over the pages of the newspapers all over the world and all over the internet as being somehow involved in a Russian collusion plot. And he's in the process of defying that, challenging that, and lawyering up and filing lawsuits. Certainly he would have known that Halper at that time would have been part of why he's having to do all that. So why is Halper addressing Page as if they're kind of buds? He says, "It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation." Really? Halper knew in July of 2017, just 3 months after Mueller began his Trump-Russia collusion investigation, and Halper already knows that things have shifted from collusion? Nobody else apparently knew that. I didn't know that. Did you know that? Did you know that just 3 months into Mueller's investigation, that the investigation had already shifted from the collusion narrative? And how did Halper know that? And he says attention has shifted from the collusion investigation to the contretemps within the White House. Contretemps, that's an interesting word. It has a tendency to mean problems, chaos, things not going well. So what he's saying here is that it seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the problems or things that are not of a positive nature that are going on within the White House. Now, this could certainly be Halper just commenting on news stories he's reading in the New York Times or Washington Post or whatever, because there was always stories back then, and there still is to this day, but especially back then, about all the changes and all the chaos going on within Trump's White House, because you had all these black hats around him trying to stab him in the back. And so there was a lot of people coming and going. There was a lot of leaks, a lot of these sorts of things going on. But then it gets even more interesting on that turn, because in that sentence, there's not a period at the end of this sentence. There's a comma where he says, this is all one sentence. It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the contretemps, meaning chaos, within the White House, and comma, how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. Attention shifted from the collusion investigation to the contretemps, the chaos within the White House, and how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. So what is the subject of this email? It's all fluff up to this point. This is all fluff. Dear Carter, fluff. I thought I'd write as the summer wears on to ask how you are doing and what your plans are at this point. Fluff. It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the contretemps within the White House. That is not fluff. That is setting up a sentence for a sentence that's coming next that is the real point of the email, which is how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. He's wanting to know, he's wanting some inside information, if he can get it, about Scaramucci and how he's going to be accommodated in his position there. Accommodated. Now, at this time, this was 3 days after Scaramucci had already given his first, he had already been on the job for 3 days. Had not yet been confirmed, but he had already been, he'd already done 3 press conferences as the communication director. And he had already begun running his mouth and getting himself in trouble at that point. So this was just 3 days after Scaramucci had already arrived on the scene, had been named the communication director, had given 3 or 4 press briefings, and at this point we got Halper asking how Scaramucci is going to be accommodated. Someone's going to have to make... Who's accommodating him? How he's being accommodated. In other words, taken care of. And then he says, I must assume this gives you some relief. Why would Halper suggest that Carter Page would have some feeling of relief because of Scaramucci? What would Scaramucci have to do with giving Carter Page relief? I mean, were they buds? Was Scaramucci going to try to get Carter Page a gig? Was he going to do something to help clear Carter Page's name? I mean, why would Carter Page? And how does Carter Page know Scaramucci? How does Halper know Scaramucci? Why, or does he know Scaramucci? He's suggesting here that he might or has some interest. Why is Halper at all concerned or interested in Scaramucci? Why is Halper even remotely interested in just another one of the people coming in and out of the revolving door at the White House at that time as a communication director? Why is he interested or even interested in having a discussion about Scaramucci with Carter Page? What is the connection here? And he goes back to fluff. We are in Virginia enjoying a warm but quiet summer. Be in touch when you have the time. Would be great to catch up. Well, all he's got is time, because he certainly couldn't find a job at that point. So everything in this email is fluff, except for 2 sentences. Everything is fluff except for 2 sentences. It seems attention has shifted a bit from the collusion investigation to the contretemps within the White House and how or if Mr. Scaramucci will be accommodated there. 1 sentence, and then I must assume this gives you some relief. Sentence number 2. The only 2 things in this email that are important. Everything else is fluff. So, that gives us pause and allows us to ask a few questions. Let's see if we can come up with any answers. We know that Scaramucci was made the Director of Communications on July the 21st of 2017, 3 days before this letter was written. Of course, he exited 7 days later for a total of 10 days. He exited on July the 31st, 2017. We know that Scaramucci worked for Goldman Sachs before he left to set up his own company, Skybridge Capital. He also was working at Lehman Brothers back at 2003, 2005, just before Lehman Brothers became the bank that caused the great collapse. You know who else was working there at that time? John Kasich. So then Scaramucci tries to sell his Skybridge Capital company to China. In 2017, that began. But in April of 2018, the deal was killed. It did not get approved by the Committee on Foreign Investments. Now we know that Scaramucci was a rotten Reverend Clinton supporter. We also know he was an Obama supporter prior to that. He even raised money for Obama. We know that Scaramucci is a strong supporter of gun control and gay rights. He was also Mitt Romney's finance co-chair in 2012. We also know that Scaramucci attended the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2018 and has attended other similar things with the globalist New World Order in the past. We know that he supports the global warming hoax. He supports the globalist on free trade and is really opposed to Trump's policies on trade. And of course, he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. How did this son of a bitch ever get into Trump's White House? Hard to believe. So Scaramucci appears to me to have been just another spy, but not an official spy. Probably just someone that somehow knows Halper or knows someone in that group, and he was probably put in there to wreak havoc, to create problems. It's probably why Scaramucci was put in there, to do nothing more than create problems, which is exactly what he did. He lasted 10 days and he was a disaster, and he caused a lot of chaos. And obviously Halper knows all about him. He's a globalist. Was a Hillary Clinton supporter, an Obama supporter, raised money for Obama. He's CFR. He attends Davos and other types of things. He's a globalist, free trader, which means he sounds like he would oppose Trump on just about everything. He's into global warming, gun control, whole 9 yards. Now, here is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Stefan Halper, the fat man, was paid $411,575 from the DoD Office of Net Assessment on September the 26th of 2016. Just 5 days before Operation Crossfire Hurricane began, and several months, 5-6 months after Halper's initial contacts with Michael Flynn, Carter Page, and George Papadopoulos. 3 days, and this would of course would have been 3 days after Isakov's article came out, where Carter Page, where the Isakov article comes out in Yahoo News, which tells us that Carter Page is now being investigated. That was the story that Isakov wrote that said a Trump administration or a Trump campaign official, Carter Page, is being investigated. That story came out 3 days after Halper was paid this $411,000. Halper's second payment came on July the 26th of 2017, and that was for $130,000. And that payment, of course, would have been 1 day before he writes the letter to Carter Page about Scaramucci. He's paid a second payment, July of 2017, for $130,000, the day after he writes the letter we just went through, showing that he's still being paid to do his spying on the campaign, and he's still in good communications with Carter Page, despite the fact that Page certainly has to know by now that Halper was certainly involved in his getting the FISAs on him. Why would you want to talk to a guy who just set you up with the FBI and got FISAs on you? And let's not forget that both Downer, Alexander Down the Hatch Downer, and Stefan Halper both worked for Hackloot, the private intelligence firm in London. So something needs to give here. Now, I'll be honest with you. And let's not forget that Papadopoulos was on an interview with Maria Bartiromo several months back, and when she brought up Carter Page, Papadopoulos said, "Hey, as far as Carter Page is concerned, don't mix me up with him, because the fact is, I don't know what to think about Carter Page. I never met him personally, but he called me on the phone one time, and he called me and said, 'Hey, you better watch yourself, and I'm going to be watching you.'" And Papadopoulos was like, "Who is this guy? And what is he? Who is he to call me and say, 'Hey, you better watch yourself, and I'm going to be watching you'?" And Papadopoulos didn't really know what to think. So clearly, Papadopoulos is very skeptical of Carter Page. Now, over the last 2 years or so, my thoughts on Carter Page is I just always thought the guy comes off to be too much of a dope, kind of a dopey guy to be taken seriously by an intelligence agency, unless you want to use him and manipulate him as a tool. But he doesn't strike me as someone that an intelligence agency is going to bring in as to be one of the brain trust of a plot. He strikes me as more of someone that you would use to manipulate to carry out a plot. So I'm not sure at this point. In the past, I've believed that Carter Page was just used. That's kind of what I thought. But I've had many people in the comments section of my videos over the past 2 years say, no. I think Carter Page was a player in this. I think he was part of the plot. I don't think he was a dupe. I think he was part of the plot. And I've never really been able to come down on that side. But now I think I am beginning to question Carter Page. I feel pretty solid about Papadopoulos, although, everybody, manipulates things a little bit to benefit themselves, and probably that's going on with Papadopoulos to some degree. But I think he's, for the most part, we're getting pretty much the straight truth out of him. But Carter Page, he's very aloof. When you see him on TV, he finally came out after all this time. Just a few months ago, he finally came out. Now, he had mentioned before that he worked for the FBI as an informant, but he finally comes out a couple of months ago and admits that he's been working as an asset for U.S. intelligence for years and years. So he's clearly some kind of intelligence asset. Whether or not they used him to manipulate him, and whether Halper used him to manipulate him, is what I would generally think. But it makes me question that when I see this email, this letter from Halper to Page in in July of 2017, which is more than a year and 3 months after he had all those contacts with Carter Page, and certainly at a time by July 2017, Carter Page knows that Halper was one of the individuals probably responsible for him getting the FISAs on him. So why are there these good vibes coming from Page? From Halper in this letter to Page. These are good vibe sort of things, buddy things, things that you would say to someone you trust or feel you're on good terms with. Why would Halper believe that Carter Page would have any interest in talking to him after probably figuring out by now that Halper was part of setting him up? And so it certainly raises questions and makes you think, wait a minute. Was Page really being set up? Was he? Did he know he had a FISA on him? Was he okay with having a FISA on him? Did he agree to allow them to put a FISA on him so that he could open them up to an investigation into Trump? That would certainly be something that an asset like Carter Page, they could have come up to him and said, hey, Carter Page, you want to help us out? Would you mind if we got a FISA on you? We'll be totally upfront and let you know, hey, we're going to be listening to everything, the whole 9 yards, but what we want is to get a FISA on you so that we can listen to Trump. Would Carter Page cooperate? He admitted he's been cooperating with the intelligence agencies now for many, many years. That's what it looks like. It's time for Carter Page to come clean, whatever it may be. And I may be, taking a step too far here, but it's certainly, in this particular plot, I don't trust anybody. And this raises too many questions for me. And now that we can see that Scaramucci was clearly working for the other team, and this was all, and his entire stint as White House Communications Director he only did it to go in there like a bull in a china shop, create havoc, and make Trump look bad. That's all Scaramucci accomplished, was he made Trump look bad. Why would Carter Page be happy, according to Stefan Halper, that Scaramucci be accommodated, knowing good and well he was just going to make Trump look bad? Why would Halper, and specifically Carter Page, be happy that Scaramucci is in there making Trump look bad? Carter Page needs to answer some questions. Yes, he does. John Solomon was on Lou Dobbs yesterday, and he said that he believes we'll see the IG report anywhere from mid-September to early October. He says that it will show that the FBI knowingly and willfully misled the FISA court and that U.S. intelligence agencies may have been involved in political surveillance. You think so? We also had Dr. Mark Siegel going on Tucker Carlson saying that there was hemorrhaging in Epstein's neck and there was bruising, which is consistent with strangulation, not hanging. We also know that the coroner didn't make the call. In fact, his boss made the call a week after the initial examination. And we also know that 2 days before his death, Epstein signed off on a new will.